time for our first responders to not have to decide whether they have the will to live or they're going to have a place to live, because that's what it comes to when they decide to not seek treatment.
Gwinnett County Police Officer Ashley Wilson tells a House committee about her traumatic experience watching her partner get shot and die. She's the reason there's now legislation to help first responders with PTSD. Good evening and welcome to Lawmakers on this day 8 of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Donna Lowry in Atlanta. Tonight, our show is all about public safety. We will hear more from Officer Wilson during the show, and one of the members of the House Public Safety Homeland Security Committee will join us in the studio. But first, we get a wrap-up of the news at the Gold Dome from our Capitol correspondent, Sarah Callis.
Hi, Donna. Today, lawmakers acknowledged Mental Health Awareness Day at the Capitol with the debut of a new campaign. Both Republicans and Democrats gave press conferences this afternoon to address some of their priorities this session. Speaker of the House Jon Burns announced major tax legislation aimed at helping Georgians' pocketbooks. One of the new bills proposes increasing the child tax deduction from $3,000 to $4,000.
Child care costs are here with us every day. We're hopeful that this extra $1,000 deduction per child will help alleviate some of those costs for the parents in our state.
Another would double the homestead exemption from $2,000 to $4,000. Burns says he hopes the increase will make it easier for Georgians to become homeowners. The third bill would remove the cap on revenue shortfall reserves. Burns said Governor Kemp requested the legislation,
which will allow our state to save responsibly, build on reserves, and provide more tax relief to Georgia families, both in the short term and the long term, for those times when our financial situation may not be as strong as it is today.
And a final bill would affirm Governor Kemp's proposed state income tax cut. The new flat rate tax would be 5.39%, down from 5.49%.
But right now, there are no more important issues impacting Georgia families than higher prices, and coming as a result of some things coming out of Washington with President Biden, with our 40-year high in inflation rates.
Democrats also held a press conference to push for a committee hearing on legislation for reproductive rights. Democrats filed in both the House and the Senate. In both chambers, the bills were assigned to Republican-led committees and have not received a hearing.
America was founded as a representative democracy, but they are not representing the people in this state. My Republican colleagues are ignoring the facts and silencing the Georgia citizens who elected them.
In the House, Representative Katie Dempsey unveiled a new mental health crisis hotline promotion featuring a familiar face from around the Capitol, First Lady Marty Kemp.
In the coming weeks, you will see advertisements around our Georgia promoting this tremendous resource. And to help each of us spread that word and help people find access to the resources that they need in their individual communities, this morning I'd like to direct your attention to the video screens for one of these messages that you will be seeing. This one features our very own First Lady, Marty Kemp.
I'm Georgia First Lady Marty Kemp. As a mom to 3 daughters, I know firsthand how hard it is for kids these days. They're facing a lot of challenges that we didn't face growing up. And it's not just our youth. If you're thinking about suicide or worried about a loved one or would like emotional support, help is available 24/7. Call or text 988. I'm here to tell you it's okay to not be okay. There is hope. Call or text 988. It's confidential.
Also, Cobb County's embattled school district map was debated in the Senate today when SB 338, a new Republican-drawn map, was brought to the floor. The district map has been in litigation for the last 2 years, after the first map was challenged by the Southern Poverty Law Center, the ACLU, and residents, with claims of packing people of color into 3 districts. Fighting between the Cobb County Board of Education and the Cobb County Board of Commissioners further complicated the issue. But a recent federal court decision ordered the legislature to draw a new map.
In this process, we had meetings among Cobb legislators, the 8th and 9th of January this year. The first 2 days of session, we had 2 meetings, open meetings, in a bipartisan group among our Cobb legislators to discuss the issue. And what you see before you is the product of thoughtful work to address the provisions of the judge's order and the reapportionment principles of compactness, core retention, minimizing split precincts, thoughtful of things such as communities of interest and census-defined areas, and it's a map that I think we can all be very proud of.
The proposed map in this bill does not adequately restore voting power to Black and Hispanic voters that were injured legally by the 2022 maps. Instead, it perpetuates the balance of power these maps created, the empowerment of white voters at the expense of Black and Hispanic voters.
The bill was engrossed before it passed 32-19 along party lines. We also heard from a group of younger lawmakers calling themselves the Future Caucus, made up of legislators under age 45 who say they will work in a more bipartisan fashion on issues that affect their generations. That's all for my Capitol Report, Donna. I'll see you tomorrow on Day 9.
Our thanks to Sarah Callis for that wrap-up. Public safety is a top concern in each legislative session, and tonight we will look at several issues legislators are considering. Joining me is a lawmaker who has devoted his public and private life to those issues, Democratic Representative Scott Holcomb of Atlanta. He's an attorney who served as a prosecutor in the Army and is the founding partner in his law firm. Welcome to Lawmakers.
Thanks, Donna.
I want to add that we also invited the majority whip for the Senate, Randy Robertson. He was unable to make it, but we hope to have him on at some point in the show. So we have you with us today to talk about things. I want to start with something that he was involved in. At 7 a.m. this morning, there was a hearing about the Fulton County Jail. The Fulton County Jail Public Safety Subcommittee that the Senate created had a meeting, and it was created last year, this particular subcommittee, to deal with the 10 deaths at the Fulton County Jail last year. There's been one death this month, so that's 11 in the last few months. So I want to play a portion of today's subcommittee meeting where Fulton County Sheriff Pat Labatt spoke with the Chairman of Public Safety, John Albers, about the number of prisoners in the jail from the high during the pandemic.
The top number was 3,600 individuals.
So you peaked out at 3,600.
Yes.
I mean, that's an extraordinary reduction. Extraordinary. I mean, it's like close to 30%. Right. And I know that there are folks that are both in the room, but other people who are listening. And I would implore our friends in the media that always like to report the bad news and not the good news, that this needs to be reported, that significant teamwork and progress is in play, and you now are at a capacity that we feel a lot more comfortable with. Are we still working on it? The answer is certainly. Do we all have more work to do? The answer is yes. Yeah, so quite a few people still in the jail, but there at least is work toward reducing the numbers. How do you feel about, you're in the House, the Senate has a subcommittee. How do you feel about approaching it that way?
That's certainly their prerogative, and I think that it's something that needs to be examined. What I would have suggested and recommended, however, I'm in the minority party, so our ability to influence things is limited. I would have suggested that they do this statewide. Georgia has a problem with prison safety and jail safety across the state. That's been captured and chronicled by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution as well as others. And the bottom line is we have to have safety for those that work in those institutions, and we have to have safety for the prisoners as well. And right now we don't. So what I would propose is that we really take a very critical eye to it and even hire perhaps an audit firm to come in, really examine how we're doing, what we're doing well, what we're doing poorly, and what we need to achieve. I'm not sure that the results of this study committee will be that helpful in terms of state-level policy, but it is something that needs to be examined because, generally speaking, what we're doing is not working.
Yes, and that was what I was going to ask Majority Whip Robertson about. What can a state-level committee do? Is the state able to get involved in something that's, a local concern?
It can, because we can influence legislation at the state level in terms of policy, and we can also potentially provide more resources. What we frequently hear at the state level in terms of corrections are a couple of things. One is that the pay typically has been really low for the people that work in those institutions, coupled with it's quite dangerous. So one question that I have is, are there things that we can do in terms of construction, in terms of building, in terms of technology that could make the places safer? You don't hear that much about that. And so for the most part, we just kind of keep riding along, but there's no really deep, sophisticated inquiry in terms of the causes and what potentially we could do to fix these things.
It does sound like it's getting better, but still a long way to go. We will continue to look at that. I want to talk about one of the bills you are co-sponsoring, and that is the Pediatric Health Safe Storage Act for guns. It's HB 161. Tell us what that's all about.
This bill, it's a very simple idea, and the idea is to try to keep children safe from gun violence. And so the impetus behind it, and I want to give credit to my House colleague, Dr. Au, who's really been a champion of trying to improve safety with respect to firearms, would be to make it so that individuals that have firearms have to secure them safely if they're going to be in the presence of children. And then there is a criminal component to the bill if someone were to not do that. But I think it's kind of common sense of, if you have children, you want to make sure that they don't have access to the firearm, so that way they don't hurt themselves or others. Interestingly, I think her bill prompted a response bill from the majority party, and that bill would have a tax credit for containers that secure firearms. So instead of having it be punitive with a potential criminal penalty, this instead would be an incentive through a tax credit. But whatever it takes to get to the outcome that we want, which is to reduce overall gun violence, I think it should be considered.
Now, so I know that Representative Michelle Au was surprised last year when there was a hearing on her bill. Do you think this bill from the majority party is because of that?
I think it definitely prompted it, for sure. And the question will be how far it moves. This is unfortunately an election year, and so we'll see if a good idea can win out, or if it will be defeated by politics.
Okay. So I want to get into another thing. Your thoughts on a bill that might be that you did not vote on, and that has to do with contraband and corrections officers. So talk about the bill a little bit and why you voted no.
Sure. There's been an effort to try to address the issue of contraband in prisons, which is something that we hear a lot about, particularly cell phones and drones and things like that. And it would pretty dramatically increase the penalties, with presumably the idea being that the higher the penalties, the less likely that it would be for this activity to take place. This gets to the point that I mentioned earlier in terms of us really examining what's taking place in our correction systems, because I would like to know what are the real drivers on why people who work for the Department of Corrections are breaking the law and helping to facilitate contraband.
They're bringing in cell phones, they're bringing in cigarettes, other things.
Exactly.
They're actually drones bringing in things, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why are people doing that? Is it because they're paid too little and they're trying to supplement their income? Are they doing it just for money's sake? Are they doing it because they're being threatened and their family's being threatened, and it's an issue of trying to preserve their own security, those type of things? So it's something that I think we really want to examine. But the main reason why I voted against it, and I think many others, was because it has mandatory minimum sentences. And so it doesn't have or leave to the discretion of the judiciary to be able to consider a multitude of factors when rendering a sentencing. Do I think the behavior is wrong? Yes. Do I think that that policy to end it is the best policy? No.
And the bill right now is headed to the governor's office to sign, so
Correct.
we'll see about that. Speaking of the governor, let's talk about his school safety legislation. He has a bunch of initiatives, but one of them, of course, is out of the budget, $45,000 to go into public schools. It'll be a line item every year to go into schools for them to figure out what to do with school safety.
I'll start by saying I think everybody wishes that this money wasn't needed. I think it's shameful that we live in a time where kids go to school and don't have safety assured. I don't think that you can really talk about school safety without talking about gun violence in a larger sense, and that's something that we don't do, unfortunately. I wish we would. And that said, I am supportive of measures to increase the security of our schools. I really wish that we didn't have to do this, as I said at the beginning, but we do, and so we have to look at technological solutions, hardening them, but with that, we really need to be careful, because ultimately, what are the missions of these places? The mission is to educate our kids, and so we don't want to lose that atmosphere of being a place that kids want to be, where they can thrive, and where the focus is really on education. So coupling and figuring out a way to have a good marriage between a great educational environment and safety is not always easy to do.
Yeah, I have to ask you, there is an effort to try to come up with a bill that incentivizes teachers to carry weapons. Your thoughts?
I think that's a disaster.
Yeah, that's all you're going to say about that.
Teachers go into the teaching profession to teach. There may be some individual teachers that feel really comfortable and capable of having a firearm in the classroom, but I think if you were to poll them, the vast majority would not want that. It adds another layer to the dynamic within the classroom. So I think the much better approach is to have school resource officers and to have people that are trained with firearms. And I really try not to do policymaking by anecdote, but I'm going to share one with you very quickly. I'm a veteran, I deployed 3 times, I have some understanding of firearms, and it is a totally different world from going to the gun range and firing a weapon and then being in a situation where somebody is shooting at you. You want to have people that have training and also have the capacity to handle themselves in a very calm manner when it's just an emergency crisis situation. And I just don't know of everything that we put on children or on teachers already. I don't know that stacking this on them as well is really the best thing to do. So I've opposed it for about a decade. I remember after Sandy Hook, that was the brilliant idea on how we would fix school security in Georgia, and I'm unconvinced.
Okay, well, thank you for that answer. And thank you for being here and sticking around, because we're going to talk more with you about a few things. So thank you for sticking around for the rest of the show. It's a problem plaguing Georgia's first responders, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Ahead, what a police officer who suffers from PTSD told lawmakers at a hearing today.
Lawmakers is made possible by Georgia Farm Bureau. With over 80 years of helping everyone understand the importance of agriculture in our state. After all, ag is Georgia's #1 industry. Food and fiber production represents over $74 billion in output of Georgia's strong economy. The Georgia Farm Bureau legislative team works to represent producers across Georgia at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
People put their faith in PBS because they know that it is constantly delivering quality. It covers the whole of the United States. It's a free and independent media.
We go where the viewers are.
What are the conversations that are happening right now?
We feel that civil discourse is a civic responsibility.
What we do is authentic reporting that people can trust.
We give time so you can hear voices on all sides of an issue.
This is the place that people turn to for stories that matter.
And they know that when they walk away, they will have learned something about the world around them.
That's why this makes PBS important for daily life and, in the end, our world.
Thank you for joining us.
Community. Learning, working, playing, celebrating, doing life is always better together. At GPB, we aim to provide you with the tools to be able to do life together well. Our mission to educate, inform, and entertain inspires everything from our wide range of programming to our stimulating radio conversations to our fun in-person events. We've got something for everyone. Visit gpb.org/community to learn more about our upcoming events.
Welcome back to Lawmakers. I'm Donna Lowry. First, an update on the public safety issue we explored yesterday, a bill to provide mental health help to first responders who experience PTSD. The House Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee had a hearing on HB 451 today. Officer Ashley Wilson told the panel about the trauma she experienced after her partner was shot and killed in 2018.
I did CPR on him all the way to the hospital. I held his hand in the trauma room while they rendered aid until finally they called it. They said that our friend, who we had just celebrated his 30th birthday 3 days prior, we had just gone out for tacos and beer, was gone. And somehow we have to call his mama in California and tell her. I have to go back and look at a shift of people and say that I tried my hardest, but he didn't make it. And then you know what we had to do? We had to sit on perimeter. We had to stand over evidence. We had 3 days of a manhunt looking for the people that killed him, because as much as we wanted to sit at home and cry and mourn, there was still a job to do. And I did really well. We took him all the way home to California and we buried him. But when things stopped moving, my brain started racing. I had no idea what PTSD was, other than having a veteran for a husband, of what I thought PTSD could only come from war. But I had flashbacks, I had nightmares. I went from an Ironman triathlete to someone who struggled to brush their teeth and get off the couch. My life was crumbling around me.
Officer Ashley Wilson with the Gwinnett County Police Department talking about a traumatic experience. And I'm so glad that Representative Scott Holcomb of Atlanta, you're with us, because you stayed with us through the show, and I appreciate this. You're on that committee. You were there when she was talking today. Talk about listening to some of the testimony like that today.
I was there, and I thought Officer Ashley Wilson did a terrific job sharing her story, as did the others that testified. And the impact of trauma on our first responders is real, it's significant, and I'm grateful that as a society we're at a much better place today than we were 5-10 years ago in talking about it and having an understanding, because they need to have access to the mental health care needed to be able to deal with these things.
Yeah. So the good news is that she, first of all, Representative Devin Seabaugh, who we had on the show yesterday, said that Officer Wilson is the one who came to him about this bill. So she's been the impetus for this bill, and she was able to be there today when the Senate committee, the House committee voted. You guys voted unanimously to pass the bill, so it moves on. And so we'll see what happens with that. We'll keep people up to date. So let's talk about another issue involving all of this, public safety. And this is something that's near and dear to you, because you and I talked about this last year. And this is a bill that deals with the wrongful conviction of people who've been incarcerated. So it's the Wrongful Conviction Compensation Act. And it's a bill that has bipartisan support. Last year, I was able to talk to people, and I want to play a little about that bill from last year.
When we're up here we're representing hundreds or thousands of people when we vote on bills. This is a one-on-one, very intimate, very, very, very stressful and very gut-wrenching, to use a not so pleasant term, because you don't want to fail them. They've been failed by the system already, and you don't want to be the one to fail them again.
For these lawmakers, the bills are personal because each legislation represents one person. For Representative Penny Houston, it's Devonia Inman, exonerated after 23 years.
There was a lady that worked at Taco Bell who was murdered, and he was charged in the murder. They had some evidence was withheld by the DA. DNA proved finally that he was not the person. They disregarded the DNA later on. And supposedly one of the law enforcement people lied at the trial.
For Representative Debbie Buckner, it's Terry L. Tilley of Troup County, who spent 40 years in prison before exoneration.
They not only were exonerated, which is an extremely difficult process, and they have been released from being in prison, and they are now just trying to get a way to get themselves back on their feet and start their life.
I'm just a representative just trying to get what's right, a little justice around here. And I hate, everybody doesn't have a voice, and I felt like I was a voice for people who don't have a voice.
A voice for people who don't have a voice. So you have a bill, HB 364, dealing with this. Talk about what the difference would be from one lawmaker dealing with one person to a committee of some sort. Talk about that.
Yes. So the way that the process works now for those who are wrongfully convicted, and mostly what we're talking about are those who are truly innocent, so not some type of legal technicality, but truly innocent, and then spent 10, 15, 20, 25 years in prison. It's important that we compensate these people. So the way that it works right now is an individual who has been wrongfully convicted has to find a legislator, have that legislator file a bill, and then that has to go through the entire process and then be signed by the governor for that individual. It means that the General Assembly is then making these decisions. And what I've heard from many of my colleagues is that they don't really feel comfortable making these decisions and examining what took place in pretty complex criminal trials and then making these judgments. There is broad consensus that we need to compensate. So what I've proposed, and I'm very grateful to Chairman Houston and Representative Buckner, who's my seatmate, and others who have worked very hard on this as well. What we're trying to do is to have a commission of experts that will review these cases. First, make sure that they were in fact innocent, and then secondly, make a recommendation in terms of compensation. And there is a little bit of House back and forth with the Senate. One thing I have to say about the Senate last year, the House passed it, the Senate did not, but in subcommittee it was passed, and the Senate changed the range for potential compensation from 50 to 100,000 to 60 to 120,000. And that was Senator Greg Dolezal who made that recommendation for the amendment because he thought a compensation between 50 and 100,000 was too low for taking away someone's liberty. And I commend him for that. And so where the bill stands now is it's still alive. It passed subcommittees, so it would need to make it through full committee and then through the Senate. There's pretty strong support for it in the House. It passed last year multiple times, and it also passed in prior sessions. So I'm really hopeful that we can get this done. It's a very small number of people that this will affect, but those that it will affect, it will make an incredible difference for them and their families. I mean, could you imagine being wrongfully convicted and then just being told, okay, get on with your life?
And you have no money, you have not been able to make a living or anything like that. So we'll keep an eye on that bill. We're going to change topics real quickly because there's something else you want to talk about, and that's Medicaid expansion. Talk about that.
I do, thank you. Medicaid expansion gets talked about all the time. And what I want to share, because I think that it's very, very important, is that Georgia did expand Medicaid, but did so in a very limited way. What we did is we passed what's called Georgia Pathways, and it covers individuals who make up to 100% of the federal poverty level. If the state were to expand Medicaid fully, we would cover those that make up to 138% of the poverty level. Here's the difference between the two. Georgia Pathways can only be reimbursed. It's a shared split between the federal government and the state government. Under Georgia Pathways, the federal government pays roughly 66%, which means Georgia pays 34%. If we were to expand fully, the federal government would pay 90% and Georgia would pay 10%. What Governor Kemp and others have said is that they would support Georgia Pathways for up to 345,000 Georgians. If that happened, the state would pay $681 million. If we did full Medicaid expansion, we could cover 500,000 individuals for roughly $290 million. So almost a $400 million savings, coupled with, and I'll stop here, there is federal legislation that would give us a 5% boost on our existing Medicaid population for 2 years. Okay. That's estimated at $222 million. So the economic case, you hear that it's a no-brainer, is a no-brainer. So I really hope we don't take it off the table.
Well, we'll keep an eye on it. We're hearing there may be some appetite for something with Medicaid this year. Thank you for being here and for the full half hour. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
That does it for Lawmakers today. We'll be back tomorrow. That is for day 9 of the legislative session. I'm Donna Lowry, and I appreciate your company this evening. Have a good night.